Hello everybody. Today in this session we shall be discussing about development planning over the 5-year plans starting from first 5-year plan, the sectoral development development of important sectors like agriculture, industry, services over the plan period, and then we shall be summing up what we went through in this session as regards 5-year plans. Now, when we have to talk about plans, we talk about an economy. The basic intention or the basic idea to have plans is to decide what would be the goods and services that we as a country, as an economy, would be producing. How should we produce these goods and services? Should the producers use more labor, human labor, or should they use more capital, including machines? How should the goods and services be distributed among the people? Now, these are the various issues that each plan would be addressing when it starts to define for itself what would be the aims, what would be objectives of the plan. Now, if we have to look at India from the economics point of view, then you all know that primarily there are two distinct styles of economies. One is a socialistic type of economy and another is the capitalistic type of economy. But you're also aware that India is known to be a mixed economy, and you also know that in a mixed economy, the public sector enterprises, which is wholly or largely government owned, exist along with the private sector to achieve a socialistic pattern of society, so that the ultimate aim of having this kind of an economy is welfare of the general mass. Now, having defined the kind of economy that India is, we would like to know what a plan is. Broadly, as the word suggests, a plan spells out how the resources of a nation should be put to use. Now, each plan will have some general goals and some specific goals. Also, once the goals are defined, the specific goals as well as the general goals, there is going to be a time period within which these goals have to be achieved. Now, we all know that in India, the duration of a plan is 5 years. Our plan documents specify the objectives that is to be attained in each of these 5-year plans. The plan document also specifies what is to be achieved over a period of, say, 20 years, which we call as a long-term plan or a perspective plan. The 5-year plans are supposed to provide the basis for the perspective plan. Now, for the economy to define the plan and to implement the plan, you have a body which is called the Planning Commission. Now, this body was established in March 1950. It is a statutory body with the Prime Minister of the country as its chairman, and it is set up to formulate basic economic policies, draft the plans, and monitor its progress as well as implementation. As everybody knows, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was the first chairman of the Planning Commission. Now, apart from the Planning Commission, you also have the National Planning Council, which is an advisory body attached to the Planning Commission. The National Planning Council was established in 1965, and it includes experts representing a cross-section of the Indian economy. Apart from the Planning Commission and the National Planning Council, we also have something called the National Development Council. This body was established in 1951, and the chief ministers of the states, together with the members of the Planning Commission, constitute the National Development Council. Again, the Prime Minister of India presides over this council. Moving on to the 5-year plans, the development plans are drawn by the Planning Commission to establish India's economy on a socialistic pattern in successive phases of 5-year periods. As we all know, it is called the 5-year plan. Now this consists of, as we had just gone through, the Planning Commission of India, the National Planning Council, and the National Development Council, as well as the state planning commissions. Now these are the bodies which shall be implementing the 5-year plans. We were talking about general aims and objectives of a plan and specific goals. Now, if we have to think of general goals of all our 5-year plans till now, then some of the general goals that we have carried over a period of time are growth, modernization, self-reliance, and equity. Let's see some of the objectives of the various 5-year plans that we have had till now. The first 5-year plan, as you all know, was between 1951 and 56. Now in July 1951, the Planning Commission issued the draft outline of the first 5-year plan for the period April 1951 to March 1956. This was presented to the Parliament in December 1952. This was the first plan after our independence, and naturally agriculture received the main thrust for sustaining of growth and development of industries, which would not have been possible without a significant rise in the yield of raw material and food. Specifically, the first 5-year plan aimed at increasing food production to fully utilize the available raw materials and to check inflationary pressure. The outlay for the first 5-year plan was proposed at rupees 3,870 crore. The first 5-year plan was more than a success because there were good harvests in those years. Moving on to the second 5-year plan, the period being 1956 to 1961, there was a slight shift in what we aimed at. The first 5-year plan aimed at sustainability of agriculture, and the second 5-year plan aimed at launching industrialization. Professor Mahalanobis was considered the chief architect of the second 5-year plan, and the main objective was, as we just said, to launch industrialization and strengthen the industrial base of the economy. It was in this light that the 1948 Industrial Policy Resolution was revised and a new resolution was adopted in 1956. The second 5-year plan started with an emphasis on the expansion of the public sector and aimed at the establishment of a socialistic pattern of society. The specific objectives of the plan was to achieve a sizable increase in the national income so as to raise the level of living. Rapid industrialization of the country with particular emphasis on the development of basic and key industries. The outlay for the second 5-year plan was to the extent of rupees 4,800 crores though the actual outlay was only rupees 4,672 crore. The plan advocated huge imports, which led to emptying of funds leading to foreign loans, and it shifted the basic emphasis from agriculture to industry maybe far too soon. And during this plan, the price level had increased by 30% against a decline of 13% during the first plan. In the third 5-year plan between 1961 and 1966, the emphasis was on long-term development. The third plan stated that during the 5-year period concerned, the Indian economy must not only expand rapidly, but at the same time become self-reliant and self-generating. The objectives of the third 5-year plan was to increase the national income of more than 5% annually. The investment pattern laid down must be capable of sustaining this growth rate in the subsequent years. Secondly, to increase the agricultural produce and to achieve self-sufficiency by increasing food grain production. Thirdly, greater equality of opportunities, more even distribution of economic power, and reducing wealth and income disparities. Also, it was realized from the experience of the first two plans, because after the success of the first 5-year plan, India felt that we can move on, and maybe we too soon took up industrialization of the country, which was not very successful. So during the third 5-year plan, the emphasis was laid again on agriculture. So agriculture was again given the top priority to suffice the requirement of export and industry. Unfortunately, the third 5-year plan was not a success due to many unforeseen misfortunes, among which the predominant causes were Chinese aggression, which took place in 1962, the Indo-Pak War that took place in 1965, and one of the severest drought in 100 years in 1965-66. Now, with the failure of the third 5-year plan, India decided to take a plan holiday. So between 1966 and 1969, we had 3 annual plans. Now, the prevailing crisis in agriculture and the serious food shortage that had occurred necessitated that the agriculture sector be re-emphasized, and so during the 3 annual plans, the emphasis was again laid on agriculture. During these plans, a whole new strategy of evolving agriculture was developed, which involved widespread distribution of high yielding varieties of seeds, extensive use of fertilizers, exploitation of irrigation potential, and soil conservation. This was done so as to tide over the crisis that had occurred in agricultural production. During the annual plans, the economy basically absorbed the shocks given during the third plan, making way for a planned growth. Now, after the 3 plan holidays where we had annual plans, the fourth 5-year plan was adopted by the Indian economy between 1969 and 1974. The objectives of this plan period was to achieve stability and progress towards self-reliance. Apart from this, the fourth 5-year plan also aimed at achieving an overall rate of growth of 5.7% annually. the fourth five-year plan also aimed at raising the exports at the rate of 7% annually. For the fourth five-year plan, the total proposed outlay was to the extent of rupees 24,880 crore, which included rupees 15,900 crores as public sector outlay and rupees 8,980 crore as private sector outlay. For the fourth five-year plan, the emphasis was on agriculture's growth rate so that a chain reaction could start. So the emphasis or the priority was still on stabilizing agriculture, on sustaining agriculture and evolving agriculture, because agriculture still was the mainstay of the economy. Now this plan fared well in the first 2 years because there was record production in agriculture. However, the last 3 years was a failure because there were poor monsoons. During this plan period, the country also had to tackle the influx of Bangladeshi refugees before and after the 1971 Indo-Pak War. With this background, the country moved on to the fifth five-year plan between 1974 and 1979. And this plan was formulated against the backdrop of severe inflationary pressure. The fifth plan was prepared and launched by D.D. Dhar, who proposed to achieve two main objectives, namely removal of poverty and attainment of self-reliance through promotion of high rate of growth, better distribution of income, and a very significant growth in the domestic rate of savings. The fifth five-year plan aimed at, of course, in addition to the main objectives of removing poverty as well as attaining self-reliance, a 5.5% overall rate of growth in the gross domestic product, expansion of productive employment and fuller utilization of existing skills and equipment, a national program for minimum needs and extended program of social welfare. For the fifth five-year plan, the total outlay that was proposed was to the extent of rupees 53,410 crore. However, this plan was terminated in 1978 instead of 1979 when the Janata government came to power. Between 1980 and 85, we had the fifth five-year plan. The draft of this plan was presented in 1978. However, this plan was also terminated with the change of government in January 1980. So the new sixth five-year plan was implemented in April 1980. The objectives of the sixth five-year plan was to eliminate unemployment and underemployment, to raise the standard of living of the poorest of masses, to reduce disparities in income and wealth. Now, the proposed outlay for the sixth plan totaled up to rupees 1,58,710 crore. The seventh five-year plan, which was between 1985 and 1990, was approved on November 9, 1985 by the National Development Council. The plan was part of the long-term plan for a period of 15 years, and it aimed primarily at decentralization of planning and full public participation in development. The seventh five-year plan also aimed at maximum possible generation of productive employment. So basically, the aim during the seventh five-year plan was improvement in the quality of labor force as also in optimum utilization of the existing labor force. Now, apart from improving the productive employment prospects, as also bringing about decentralized planning, the 7th five-year plan also aimed at removal of poverty and reduction in income disparities. So this particular objective was carried over from the previous 5-year plan. The 7th five-year plan was a great success, and the economy recorded 6% growth rate against the targeted 5%. The 8th five-year plan, which was between 1992 and 1997, was postponed by 2 years because of political upheavals at the center, and was launched after, sadly, a worsening balance of payment position and severe inflation during 1990-91. The 8th plan proposed a growth rate of 5.6% per annum on an average during this plan period. The plan also focused on clear prioritization of sectors and projects for investment in order to facilitate implementation of the policy initiatives taken in the areas of fiscal, trade and industrial sectors, as well as human development. Now, if you are to recollect, it was the 8th five-year plan where there was a paradigm shift in the economic policy of the country, and this was the period where major economic reforms were brought about. So the objectives of the 8th five-year plan was generation of adequate employment to achieve near full employment level by the turn of the century, to contain population growth through people's active cooperation and an effective scheme of incentives and disincentives, to universalize elementary education and completely eradicate illiteracy among the people in the age group of 15 to 35 years. Some of the main economic performances during the 8th five-year plan period were rapid economic growth, high growth of agriculture and allied sector, as also the manufacturing sector, growth in exports and imports, improvement in trade and current account deficit. Moving on to the 9th five-year plan, which was between 1997 and 2002. The 9th five-year plan was the first concrete attempt to translate the program of economic reforms and the new economic policy within the framework of an indicative plan. The approach paper to the 9th plan was approved by the National Development Council on 16th January 1997. The objectives of this plan was to prioritize agriculture and rural development, accelerate the growth rate of economy, to provide food and nutritional security to all, and to contain growth rate of population. Besides these objectives, the 9th five-year plan aimed at empowering women and socially disadvantaged groups such as the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, the backward classes and the minorities. And this plan also aimed at promoting and developing participatory institutions like Panchayati Raj institutions, cooperatives and self-help groups. The 10th five-year plan, which was between 2002 and 2007, was approved by the National Development Council on December 21st, 2002. The plan further developed the NDC mandated objectives, which was of doubling per capita income in 10 years and achieving a growth rate of 8% of GDP per annum. This plan had a number of new features. For example, for the first time, it recognized the rapid growth of labor force over the next decade. Secondly, the 10th five-year plan addressed the issue of poverty and unacceptably low levels of social indicators. This plan also adopted a differential development strategy to equate national targets into balanced regional development, as there is vast difference in the potentials and constraints of each state. The 10th five-year plan also recognized that the governance is perhaps one of the most important factors for ensuring realization of the plan. It identified measures to improve efficiency, unleash entrepreneurial energy, and promote rapid and sustainable growth. The proposed major reforms for agriculture sector, making agriculture the core element of the plan, was also one of the new features of this plan. Since economic growth is not the only objective, the plan aimed at harnessing the benefits of growth to improve the quality of life of the people by setting some of the following key targets. One of the targets of this plan period was to see that all children should be in school by 2003 and all children should complete at least 5 years of schooling by 2007. The 10th five-year plan also aimed at reducing the poverty ratio from 26% to 21%. It also aimed at a growth in gainful employment to at least keep pace with the addition that is taking place to the existing labor force. The 10th five-year plan also aimed at reducing the decadal population growth from 21.3% that existed between 1991 and 2001 to at least 16% by 2011. Apart from the above that we just saw, the 10th five-year plan also aimed at reducing the gender gaps in literacy and wage rates by 50%, to improve the literacy rate from 65% in 1999-2000 to 75% in 2001, to reduce the infant mortality rate from 72 in 1999-2000 to 45 in 2007, as also to reduce the maternal mortality rate from 4 per thousand in 1999-2000 to 2 per thousand in 2007. Besides health, the 10th five-year plan also aimed at providing potable drinking water to all villages across the country, to clean major polluted river stretches, as also to increase the forest and tree cover from 19% in 1999-2000 to 25% in 2007. So, if we are to see the shift in the objectives of the plan from, say, the first five-year plan to the 10th five-year plan, you would definitely see a paradigm shift in the way the economy was evolving itself. For example, if we look at the first five-year plan, the major aim and objective during those years was only to have self-sustaining agricultural production so that we don't have to import. We then moved on to industrializing the country, and slowly we are now in a position to think of improving the quality of life. Now, the inherent inference that one can derive is that over a period of time, we have become a self-sustaining economy, and we are now ready to address issues like quality of life, like empowering the downtrodden, and to provide opportunities for people to participate in the process of development by encouraging issues like decentralization of planning. Now, moving on to the 11th plan, which is between 2007 and 2012, and which was put forward by the United Progressive Alliance through its paper titled Towards Faster and More Inclusive Growth. Now, the very word inclusive growth indicates that India now aims at including everyone, the masses, the grassroots level people, in the process of development and growth. Now, according to this approach paper, the monitorable targets for the 5-year plan would be a growth in the GDP to be increased to 10% by the end of this plan, the farm sector growth to be increased to 4%, creation of 7 crore job opportunities, reduce the extent of educated unemployed youth to below 5%, reduce infant mortality rates to 28 per 1,000 births, and to reduce maternal death rates to 1 per 1,000 births, to provide clean drinking water to all by 2009, that was the aim, to improve sex ratio to 935 by 2011-12 and to 950 by 2016-17, and to ensure electricity connection to all villages and broadband over power lines to households by 2009. Apart from this, a lot of emphasis has been laid on infrastructure facilities that needs to be provided to all people across the country. Among them was to provide roads to all villages that have a population of 1,000 and above by 2009. Besides that, to increase the forest and tree cover by 5%, to achieve the World Health Organization standard air quality in major cities by 2011-12, treat all urban wastewater by 2011-12, as also to clean the river waters, and to increase energy efficiency by 20% by 2016-17. So far we have seen the objectives and aims of the various 5-year plans. We will now look at the growth of sectors over the plan period. So what we'll be doing now is we shall see the growth of each sector, primarily the agriculture, the industry and the services, the outlays that was given against each of these sectors, as also the growth of these sectors over a period of, let's say, the last 6-7 decades. Now, if you were to look at this table, which depicts the real income growth of the various sectors, as also the sectoral growth rate. Now, if we were to compare the sectoral growth, the plan target with the actual growth, you can see that during the first plan, which was between 1951-56, the plan target was to the extent of 2.1%, whereas the actual growth was to the extent of 3.5%. Now, if the same thing were to be divided and seen across sectors, we can see that as far as agriculture was concerned, which was the sector which was given the priority during the first plan, the achievement was to the extent of 2.9%. In the case of industry, it was 5.9%. In case of services, it was 3.7%. In the second 5-year plan, while the target was 4.5%, the actual growth was to the extent of 4.2%. And during this plan period, the agriculture sector grew at the rate of 3.2%, the industry at the rate of 6.4%, and the services at the rate of 4.6%. During the third 5-year plan, while the plan target was to the extent of 5.6%, the actual growth was only to the extent of 2.8%. Now, if you were to recollect, third plan was not a successful plan because we had a lot of unforeseen misfortune. So, this is one of the reasons why you will see a fall in the actual growth when compared to the target. And if you were to look into the table, you will see that the growth of agriculture was actually negative to the extent of 0.5%. The industry did grow to the extent of 6.8%, whereas the services grew at the rate of 5%. Now, during the fourth 5-year plan, which was between 1969 and 1974, again, while the target was to the extent of 5.7%, the achievement was only to the extent of 3.2%. And the agriculture sector grew at the rate of 2.6%. The industrial sector grew at the rate of 3.7%, whereas services grew at the rate of 4%. During the fifth plan, the actual growth was slightly better when compared to the target, because the plan target was to the extent of 4.4%, while the growth actually achieved was to the extent of 4.7%. Now, sectorally, if we were to see, agriculture grew at the rate of 3.4%, the industrial sector grew at the rate of 6.3%, whereas the services grew at the rate of 5.5%. During 1980 and 85, which was the sixth plan period, the actual growth was to the extent of 5.5% when compared to the plan target of 5.2%. When compared to the fifth 5-year plan, the growth of agriculture was slightly better at 5.5% during sixth plan, although it was much below the industrial and the service sector's growth, because industry grew at the rate of 6.2% and the services grew at the rate of 5.4%. But then definitely it was better than the previous plan. During seventh 5-year plan, that is between 1985 and 1990, the target was to the extent of 5%, but the real income growth grew at the rate of 5.6%, which was quite a good indication. Again, as far as agriculture was concerned, there was a drop in the growth when compared to the previous plan period. The agriculture sector grew at the rate of 3.4% as compared to 5.5% during sixth plan, and the industry grew at the rate of 7.5%, while the services grew at the rate of 7.4%. During the eighth plan period between 1992 and 97, the actual growth in the real income was to the extent of 6.5% as compared to the target of 5.6%. This is when the new economic policy and the policy reforms were launched. The agriculture growth was to the extent of 3.9%, but the industry grew at the rate of 8%. The services were growing at the rate of 7.9%. During the ninth 5-year plan, that is between 97 and 2002, there was slightly fall in the actual growth of real income, which was at the rate of 5.5% compared to a target of 6.5%. The sectoral growth of agriculture was very low at the rate of 2%, and the industry was at the rate of 4.6%, but the services grew at the rate of 8.1% during the entire plan period. During the 10th plan, that is between 2002 and 2007, while the plan target was 7.9%, the actual growth in the real income was to the extent of 7.7%. Again, the agriculture growth was low at the rate of 2.3%, but the industrial and the service sector had grown phenomenally at the rate of 9.2 and 9.3% respectively. Now, during the 11th plan, which is the current plan between 2007 and 12, the figures are an average of the first 2 years of the plan. So, the actual growth rate was to the extent of 7.8%. The agriculture growth rate is at the rate of 4% currently. Now, if we were to see the sectoral growth of agriculture over the plan period, you will see that the sector has grown only at the rate of between 2.5 and 3.5 to 5%, whereas the growth in the industrial and the service sector has been steadily improving. The figures that we just discussed as regards the sectoral growth rate can also be seen on a bar chart, which is showing the growth rate during the various 5-year plans. Now, if we were to look at the plan outlay in public sector in India between 1950-51, or rather 1951-52 to 2008-9, we can see that during the first 5-year plan, while the plan outlay was to the extent of 1960 crores, in the second 5-year plan, the plan outlay was to the extent of rupees 4672 crores. In the third 5-year plan, the plan outlay for the public sector was to the extent of 8576.5 crores, which increased to 15,778.8 crores in the next plan, that is during the fourth 5-year plan. During the fifth 5-year plan, the plan outlay for the public sector was to the extent of 39,426.2 crores, which increased to 1,10,467.3 crores during the sixth plan. During the seventh plan, the plan outlay for the public sector was to the extent of 2,18,729.6 crores, which increased to 4,85,457.24 crores in 8th plan. During the 9th plan, the plan outlay was to the extent of 8,13,997.9 crores, which increased to 11,19,552 crores in the 10th plan. Now, if the same thing were to be seen with a visual aid in the graph that you can see now, in the first 4 plans, first 4 5-year plans, while the outlay was almost the same, there has been an increase in the plan outlay for the public sector from the 5th plan onwards. So, by the 10th 5-year plan, there has been a substantial increase in the plan outlay. Now, if we were to see the other sectors, say agriculture and irrigation, power, industry, transport and communication, and social services, the outlay in the plans for these sectors then we can see that during the first 5-year plan, while 31% of the total outlay was for agriculture, 13% of the outlay was for power, 6% for industry, 27% for transport and communication, and 22% for the social services sector. During the second 5-year plan, out of the total outlay, 20% was for agriculture and irrigation, 10% for power, 24% for industry, 28% for transport and communication, and 18% for social service sector. During the third 5-year plan, while 21% was allocated for agriculture and irrigation, 14% of the plan outlay was for power, 23% for industry, 25% for transport and communication, and 17% for social services. During the fourth 5-year plan, that is between 1969 and 1974, the allocation for agriculture and irrigation was 24% of the total allocation, whereas 15% of the allocation was for the power sector, 23% for the industry, 20% for the transport and communication sector, and 18% for the social services sector. In the fifth plan, the agriculture and irrigation sector got 22% of the total outlay, 19% went to the power sector, 26% of the allocation was for the industrial sector, 18% was for the transport and communication sector, and 17% for the social services sector. During the sixth plan, that's between 80 and 1985, while 24% of the sectoral allocation was for agriculture and irrigation, 28% was for power sector, 16% each for industry, transport and communication, and social services sector. During the seventh 5-year plan, the power sector got a substantial portion of the plan allocation, which was to the extent of 28%, while agriculture and irrigation got to the extent of 22% of the allocation. The industrial sector had 13% of the total allocation, while transport and communication sector was given 19% of the total allocation. The service sector again got about 18% of the total plan. During the eighth plan, that's between 92 and 97, while agriculture got 21% of the total plan outlay, 27% was for the power sector, 10% for industry, 21% for transport and communication, and 22% for social services sector. Now, if we were to see the plan-wise financial expenditure on irrigation in India as a part of the total expenditure, then we can see that between the first 5-year plan and the 8th 5-year plan, there has been a fall in the percentage expenditure on irrigation. For example, if we were to look at the first 5-year plan in the table, the extent of expenditure on irrigation was 23% of the total expenditure of all sectors, which reduced to the extent of 12% in the second and third plan. During the annual plans between 1966 and 1969, there was a slight improvement when the percentage expenditure was to the extent of 15%. After that, it again fell steadily from 15 to 14% in the next plan, 14% again during the annual plans between 1978 and 80, and to the extent of 11% in the sixth plan. Sadly, after that it has been reducing at the rate of 9% or 7%. So, the total, or rather the percentage expenditure on irrigation sector has been falling. Now, if we were to look at the water supply and sanitation sector, then we can see that during the first plan, 1.4% of the public sector outlay was for water supply and sanitation, and 1.28% of public sector outlay was for that sector. Now, in the second plan, while 1.07% of the public sector outlay was for water supply and sanitation sector, during the third plan it was to the extent of 1.23%. Now, over the years, the range of the investment in this particular sector has been between 2.5% to 3.5%. In fact, even during the 10th plan, the percentage of public sector outlay was to the extent of 2.89% on water supply and sanitation. Now, if we were to look at education as a sector and the percentage of budgetary allocation for this particular sector, then we can see that over the period of the entire plans, the percentage allocation in the GDP to education has been around 3.5 to 4%. For example, during 91-92 it was 3.8% of GDP. During 92-93 it was 3.7%. From 2000 onwards it's been around 4%, only falling again to the extent of 3.7% in 2005-06. Now, if we were to see plan-wise share of public and private sectors in the gross domestic capital formation, then we can see that the public sector share in total saving during the first 5-year plan was to the extent of 33.2%, whereas the private sector share was 66.8%. Now, if we were to look at this as a percentage of GDP at market prices, then the share of the public sector was to the extent of 3.5%, while the private sector share was to the extent of 7.1%. During the second 5-year plan, if we were to look at the percentage of GDP at market prices, then the extent of public sector was 6.1% and the private sector was to the extent of 8.4%. During the third plan, the public sector share was 7.4%, whereas the private sector share was to the extent of 8.1%. This has hovered around 6 to 8% in the next 2 plan periods, whereas during the 8th plan, that is between 1992 and 97, while the public sector share was to the extent of 8.6%, the private sector share as percentage of GDP at market prices was to the extent of 17.4%. So much so for the sectoral achievement of the plans. Now, one would be very interested in knowing how much have we achieved through these 5-year plans, or whether 5-year plans have been successful at all for uplifting the Indian economy or for evolving the Indian economy. Like any other issue, even planning in India has had its own successes and its own failures. Now, if we were to look at what planning has achieved for India, then undoubtedly we can say that there has been an increase in the national and the per capita income. There has been a progress in the primary sector, which is agriculture. From being in a position where we had to import, we are today in a position to actually export. So there has been a progress in the use of agricultural inputs. We have increased the agricultural production and we have attained self-sufficiency. Planning has facilitated in improving the industry's position. There has been development of economic infrastructure in the country. We have diversified our exports. We have achieved immensely in science and technology. Our education system has definitely improved. But again, there have been many shortcomings too as regards our planning. Over the plan periods, if you recollect the various plan periods and its objectives, we had many of our 5-year plans aiming at eliminating poverty. Unfortunately, we have not been able to do so. We have also not been able to provide full employment or gainful employment to our employable youth. We have also failed to reduce the inequalities of income and wealth, and we have also been unable to check the growth of black money. One of the major flaws of our planning has been that we have been also unable to reduce the concentration of economic power. And although we did begin with lofty aims at bringing about equity in agriculture, we have been so far unable to implement the land reforms. Nevertheless, when we look at the entire planning process in retrospect, we can definitely say that what we have been able to achieve have been no short of success, because today India is in a position to look at the world and accept the globalization that has taken place. But for the plans, whatever equity and equality we have achieved would probably not have been possible. But for the plans, maybe we would have been either just a socialistic pattern of economy or just a capitalistic form of economy. We would not have achieved what we have achieved today. And an economy evolves over a period of time. Of course, there have been many mistakes, there have been shortcomings, but it is only when one does something does one realize that there are better ways of doing it. So over a period of time, we have also evolved our plans, which we have seen in our aims and objectives and whatever we are allocating for the various sectors. So if we were to recollect and recapitulate the entire session, we saw the various plans over the years. We also saw the various aims and objectives, the general objectives of our plans, the specific plan-wise objectives. We also saw the achievements and failures of each plan. We also discussed the sectoral growth of the various sectors, the allocations that we have made for the sectors during the plans, and we also saw what we have achieved and what we are yet to achieve. We hope that this session has been thought-provoking as well as has provided you with some food for thought. Thank you.